I thought my residency salary didn't matter if I got to train at Harvard. Who cares about a few $1,000s when doctors make so much money later, right? I was completely wrong. When Stanford residents formed a union in 2022, it started something big. Now, some residents are making over $100,000 more during their training than others. That's not small change. It's money that helps you pay off loans faster, buy a house sooner, or start a family earlier. Today, I'll show you how resident unionization is changing everything about medical training pay, and how you can benefit no matter where you match. Here's what I discovered about the financial impact of resident unionization. What happens at one program no longer stays at one program. Unionization has triggered a financial arms race in medical education, and many people are saying it's about time. Let's look at the Stanford effect. Stanford residents voted to unionize in May of 2022. The primary reason cited was the unsustainable Bay Area living costs. They secured a contract that increased compensation by 21% over 3 years. This domino effect very quickly spread to the Harvard MGH Brigham system, which responded with a 10% increase in salary and, in addition to that, $10,000 in stipends by May of 2023. Not to be outdone, Boston Medical Center quickly followed with their own housing stipend, which totaled above $10,000 over the course of several years. Other institutions like UCLA and UCSF secured similar housing stipends through their own unionization efforts. A clear division began emerging: programs with housing stipends versus those without. What was once rare is now expected at top programs. But what's truly shocking is how these benefits compound over the course of your training. Stanford's unionization victory represented a watershed moment with clear, quantifiable financial outcomes. In addition to this, Stanford's contract reveals the exact magnitude of unionization's financial impact, numbers that frankly many program directors and hospitals across the country may have hoped would never become public. Here are some of the contract victories that were secured by the Stanford residents. The 21% total compensation increase over 3 years was broken down as follows. In year 1, there was a 5% salary increase, plus a $2,800 housing stipend increase and $2,000 in meal stipends. In year 2, there was a 5% raise, and in year 3, there was a 3% raise plus $2,000 extra for their housing stipend, increasing the housing stipend to a total of $12,000. Not only that, there were key benefits that also improved, some quite substantially. Fertility benefits doubled from $10,000 to $20,000. Parental leave increased from 5 days to 6 weeks. They also have fully funded rideshare services after long shifts. These benefits address resident needs beyond just simple compensation. In addition, they had a one-time $3,000 ratification bonus and retroactive pay. This allowed for residents to have immediate financial benefit while awaiting their salary increases. So let's put this financial transformation in numbers. PGY1 compensation for Stanford residents pre-union in 2023 was $84,227. Post-union in 2025, the same PGY1 resident at Stanford would earn $100,328. This is an increase of $16,101 or 19.1%. This was a milestone achievement. It was the first contract that secured 6-figure compensation for interns. Note that this includes all stipends and takes out the union dues, which were 1.6% of base salary. This set a new benchmark for academic medicine nationwide and demonstrates the financial power of collective bargaining. The Harvard Mass General Brigham's reaction demonstrates how even the threat of collective bargaining creates immediate financial leverage. Once Stanford's residents voted to unionize, Harvard's hospitals proactively increased compensation when residents there began unionizing. This shows that collective action generates financial benefits even before a contract is signed. According to Stat News, before unionization pressure began building in the Harvard system, there was only a planned salary increase of 2.5% for 2023. There was also no housing stipend announced. However, in March of 2023, after unionization pressure started to build, there was an immediate 10% salary increase, and in addition, a $10,000 annual stipend that was added. This raised PGY1 salaries to $78,540. Despite this, in June of 2023, during the unionization vote for the Mass General Brigham system, 75% of the residents voted in favor. The system represents 2,700 residents and fellows combined. After unionization was approved, bargaining began in December of 2023. So what does this mean if you're a medical student or resident hoping for more financial flexibility in your life? Union organizing creates negotiating power before a contract is even signed. In the case of Mass General Brigham, the mere threat of unionization triggered significant compensation improvements. In addition to this, hospital systems respond to maintain recruitment competitiveness when one hospital improves their compensation. What's interesting is that multiple emails tried to dissuade unionization after announcing these benefits, according to the Harvard Crimson. This pattern has repeated itself at academic centers nationwide. Next, let's look at another major system that shows the impact of actual contracts, the University of California. The University of California has one of the largest health systems in the country. It also is a very interesting case study because many of the residency programs are unionized. In addition, UCLA, UCSF, and other UC programs demonstrate how unionization creates targeted benefits that address the highest cost housing markets, often the single biggest financial stressor for residents in these areas. At UCLA, for example, after unionizing, they have a housing stipend of $1,000 per month or $12,000 a year. They also have an educational stipend of $1,200 a year and meal allowance of up to $3,000 per year. So how much of an effect did unionization actually have? Before unionization negotiations began in 2019, initially the offer was $7,000 for a housing stipend with $1,000 annual increases. At the time, the Daily Bruin reported that the union was requesting comparable housing stipends to UCSF, which was $12,100. Now, housing stipends are standard across the entire UC system. In the most costly markets, this makes sense, since the single largest expense for most residents is going to be their housing. Previously, this was rare or minimal at most programs. So how much of an effect does this have in some of the priciest housing markets in the country? In San Francisco and LA, average one-bedroom rents exceed $2,800 per month on average. What that means is that a $12,000 annual stipend covers only about 35% of housing costs. This immediate disposable income increase can be used for things like loan payments or savings. Interestingly, non-union programs in high-cost markets typically lack equivalent support. But what does the research actually say about unionized versus non-unionized programs nationally? Recent research helps us separate anecdotes from data when evaluating unionization's financial effects. In 2024, a PLOS One study by Tiagi et al. Gives us the most comprehensive national picture of unionization's impact on resident compensation. They looked at unionized versus non-unionized programs, and they found that there was a significant difference in unadjusted PGY1 salaries. In unionized programs, the average salary was $69,648. In non-unionized programs, it was $62,214. What this means is that unionized programs on average have about $7,434 more in compensation, which is about a 12% increase over non-unionized programs. But those unadjusted numbers don't tell the whole story. What they found was that after adjusting for cost of living, the salaries were almost identical. For unionized programs, it was $62,515. For non-unionized programs, it was $62,475, a difference of just $40 per year. What they found was that base salaries were nearly identical after regional adjustment. That said, total compensation after union dues actually favored unionized programs. For these programs, average PGY1 compensation was $65,887, whereas for non-unionized programs, it was $63,515. This was a difference of about $2,372, favoring unionized programs. Note that the higher total compensation primarily reflected an increase in stipends. So how can we make sense of all of this? Unionized programs in general tend to cluster in high-cost metropolitan areas. It's not surprising that some of the most high-profile cases are in Boston, LA, and the Bay Area. The unadjusted salary advantage for unionized programs is largely to compensate for higher cost of living. That said, unionized programs still have an overall advantage in compensation, which largely comes from the stipend advantage. The conclusion? Unionized residency programs offer higher total compensation packages, but averages don't tell the entire story. One question I was really interested to answer was how much of a direct effect on total compensation over the course of residency would there be if there was unionization? To figure this out, I looked at Stanford's union contract details, which reveal the exact financial transformation for residents across their training years. Before unionization, the Stanford contract called for PGY1 total compensation to be $84,227. For PGY2s, it was $87,971, and for PGY3, it was $93,858. Post-unionization, the PGY1 total compensation is now $100,328. For PGY2s, it's $104,511. For PGY3s, the total compensation is $111,089. Note this includes all stipends and removes union dues. The overall percentage increase is substantial. For PGY1s, it's a 19.1% increase. For PGY2s, it's 18.8%, and for PGY3s, the increase is 18.4% over the pre-unionization contracts. So what's the total impact over one's entire residency? For a 3-year residency at Stanford pre-unionization, the total would have been $266,056. Post-unionization, the total compensation would be $315,928 for the same 3-year residency. This is the difference of a little less than $50,000, or an increase in 18.7%. But now let's consider a 5-year residency. Pre-unionization estimates are about $465,000 versus post-unionization it's about $555,000. This is a difference of $90,000, or again a 19.4% increase. Unionization led to a nearly $100,000 increase in total compensation. If we consider the 7-year residencies like neurosurgery or others, pre-unionization would have led to a salary of about $686,000. Post-unionization, it would be about $820,000. In other words, a difference of about $134,000. Note that these are probably underestimates, given the fact that contracts typically will increase the base salaries for each of the PGY years with every subsequent year. So unionization has had clear impacts on the financial compensation of residents, particularly in high-cost areas. While this is clear, it's important to recognize that unionization also comes with potential trade-offs. What are these costs and complexities that must be weighed? First, we consider the direct costs. Union dues are typically between 1.5 or 1.6% of base salary, which for a Stanford resident might be about $1,000 to $1,500 annually. Another thing to consider is the amount of time necessary for contract negotiations. First contracts often take 12 to 18 months or even more. Note that the Harvard Mass General Brigham residents are still negotiating after more than 18 months. This has led to benefits being delayed during protracted negotiations. Other concerns that have been raised are potential program tensions. Faculty at residency programs have raised concerns about changing training relationships. Bargaining can also create tensions with administrations. I've spoken with residents in programs that are dealing with administration negotiations, and it seems clear that these negotiations aren't necessarily creating a lot of goodwill. Next are the structural considerations. Uniform contracts negotiated by unions may reduce program-specific flexibility. Departments may have less leeway to create benefits that are specific for their program. This is because unionized programs often have more standardized benefit structures. Plus, the process does require resident leadership and engagement. But what does this all mean for your decisions about residency and fellowship? Let me leave you with actionable insights for navigating this changing landscape. The resident unionization movement requires a new approach to evaluating and selecting training programs. First, let's talk financial due diligence. When considering compensation, you should research both the base salary and housing stipends for every program. In addition, calculate the true cost of living adjusted compensation. The AAMC Financial Wellness website offers physician-specific calculators that you can use. Next, identify union status and recent contract history. Try to ask current residents about their actual financial experience. Of note, residents at union programs are typically pretty open about their compensation improvements. That's not too surprising when you consider that recently unionized programs have seen some pretty dramatic improvements in financial compensation. This also can mean that programs with active unionization efforts may see substantial changes soon. So how do we create a balanced approach for choosing our residencies? First of all, it goes without saying that financial factors matter, but shouldn't be the only consideration. I chose to go to the Harvard MGH program long before unionization was even a whisper, and frankly, I would make the same decision again. Training quality, mentorship, and career opportunities remain crucial. Also, geographic preferences must balance with financial realities. The NRMP surveyed resident applicants and found that compensation has become increasingly important, but still ranks below education as far as considerations for choosing a residency. Finally, when considering finances in residency decisions, remember that financial training decisions can compound throughout your career. Ultimately, the resident unionization movement isn't just about money, it's about recognizing the true value of your contribution to medicine during training. Next, check out top 10 paying medical specialties per hour. You'll discover which fields deliver more than $200 per hour in salary, with one specialty reaching an incredible $300 per hour. And the most surprising finding? One of these highly paid specialties has the lowest competition rate for residency spots. These insights could completely transform how you approach your specialty selection.